And blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up, we're going to give you, I don't know if it'll be a preview, but our thoughts on the Boise Mayor's press conference. That'll be on our website. And, here's the quote from this guy. I don't know if anybody watched News Nation last night. I don't think anybody watches that show. But here you have a guy named Jeremy Reagan, a third-year law student. People have accused him of being the killer or aligned with the killers of those 4 Idaho students. He gave an interview, and basically, here's the quote. You'll be reading about it soon on KIDO Talk Radio. People online have been ruthless, where he's actually being, hunted and already convicted in this case. Remember, candlelight vigil today in Moscow and in Middleton. Also, I believe another news conference, a news conference today in Fruitland, or is it Thursday? Sweet William, let me know. When, concerning the case of Michael Vaughn and the missing child. And our thoughts and especially our prayers go out to people that have missing children and are going through this tough time or that have lost their loved ones. By the way, Brian Brooks joining us, Executive Director of the Idaho Wildlife Federation. And when the tiger calls and says, Kevin Miller, a tiger alumnus of our great facility here, when the tiger calls and says, it's time that we give you some facts. And on this program, facts are overrated. I do what the tiger says. So, Brian, Mr. Brooks, you're dressed very formally, as am I today. So we'll just start with Mr. Brooks. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks. I'm glad we both wore tuxedos. It's really great.
We did. Again, as you could see, you look the part of an outdoors person. This is a dumb question, but your life is protecting the wildlife and the balance between the ranching, the farming, the hunting, the fishing. I guess we'd call you Switzerland, but what led you to this life, and how much do you and folks that I personally love but cannot relate to, because my idea of living off the land is the buffet line, as you can see by my physique. But what led you to this job? I think it's important that we know. Obviously, you do it because it's a passion of yours.
Yeah, my hunch is a lot of your listeners can relate. I grew up in Idaho, and Idaho offers this huge bounty of outdoor opportunity, whether it's non-consumptive uses of our natural resources like rafting, skiing, backpacking, doing all that kind of stuff, to the consumptive uses, which most people would associate with hunting. I grew up doing all of those kinds of things. I was really lucky to have parents that were adamant about getting us outdoors. And, when the weather starts to turn, that's actually when a new outdoor pursuit presents itself, which is hunting. It starts with dove season. It goes into upland birds. It goes into waterfowl.
Now, wait a minute. First of all, and I'm a sissy, but what do you guys have against the ducks? I love ducks. I love the geese. They're obnoxious. Look, this is how goofy I am. And this represents a portion of the population. I'm sure you've heard from them. I mean, I live in Star, where they shoot, and you can shoot legally in your backyard. Mm-hmm. I'm not making that up. So I'm thinking to myself, what do you guys have against the ducks? I love the ducks.
My personal grudge is that they're really tasty. If you think about
that's what I hear.
French cuisine, waterfowl, the fat is actually really rich, and it's one of the best flavored proteins that you can get. So duck hunting, actually, I'm looking out the window right now. It's pretty miserable. It's gusty and it's snowing. That is the best time to be out duck hunting right now. They like to fly and that stuff. So it's all about cooking it and eating it. But that's the kind of stuff I did growing up, and it's not just the harvesting or killing of animals. I know that's a negative perception that anti-hunters may have against it, but it's also about putting meat in your freezer, feeding your family, and the tradition of cooking and all that.
Does that really happen these days? Because so many folks are aligned with the sport of it, to get the photos, and do we have people that don't respect the species?
Yeah, I think there is. And social media has really put a spotlight on that. Not all hunters are the same. I think that maybe the people who don't hunt see that and kind of glom onto that image of hunters. But certainly there are people who are doing it for the clicks and the likes and sort of growing their brand as the ultimate hunter guy, and then they sell products associated with their fame. And it's been magnified, I think, during the social media era.
How big is this industry in our state? I mean, we'll just talk hunting and fishing, sir.
The industry is quite large. We work well with the Idaho Outfitters and Guides Association. Of course, they're the primary industry associated with hunting and fishing, but there's also the secondary market, like folks who sell or produce, manufacture hunting and outdoor equipment like tents, bullets, guns, all the knives, all that kind of stuff.
RVs.
In fact, RVs. In fact, my brother owns a hunting company. I'm going to plug it really quick. Argali Outdoors, they make game bags, knives, tents, stuff that gets you into the outdoors.
Well, we really don't believe in advertising here, so we'll let that slip. But a lot of us, and we'll give you the stereotypical people, folks from California, east of the Great River, where this is not ingrained in their lives. But I mean, is it $1 billion? Is it how? I mean, people legitimately for like years have been coming to Idaho, and there was a short-based reality show where I think they were from Emmett, where they would be Western guides and people would come in and live this lifestyle. The
last economic study that we had done showed that there was wildlife industry alone is an over $1.7 billion industry in just Idaho.
1.7
billion with a B.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get to you, but you are a dam buster.
Oh, sure.
Okay. But you're and again, I say that to be outrageous and provocative. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. But we've actually screened the calls today. Thank you, Bo. We appreciate that. And we do have a couple of people that want to talk to you about this issue. And obviously, we're going to give you time to go over everything scientifically, why you and Mike Simpson are right and the rest of us that love Idaho and not the fish are wrong. But we go to Amy in Boise. Good morning, Amy. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, good morning. Hey, so I just wanted to make a comment on the dam thing. I don't think we should be breaking apart the dam. We're messing with our water, number one. Number two, they keep saying that it's for the fish. Well, everybody I talked to that went fishing for salmon and stuff, they said they got record numbers. So if they're getting record numbers, it tells me that the fish are adapting.
Yeah, that's a great question and comment, Amy. Thank you for saying it. And I'd also like to preface all questions by saying, fire away. If we can't answer questions, if what we're standing for here is indefensible, we wouldn't have our stance here. So those are good questions, and we get those quite a bit. So one, it's important to understand that we're just looking at the 4 lower Snake River dams, which are not in Idaho. They're in Washington. There is no impact on Idaho's water usage because all that water is already spoken for by the time it leaves to go out of state. But I will say, because the 4 species in Idaho that are listed, the anadromous fish, they don't do well with dammed rivers. So we have come up with, there was some litigation and there was a settlement called the Nez Perce Agreement. We actually flush water from eastern Idaho downriver to act as a sort of air conditioner and sort of a forceful push for our smolt, our baby salmon and steelhead. We actually send water downstream, 487,000 acre feet. That is a whole lot of water, and it comes from as far east as Swan Valley on the Wyoming border. And we flush that. It goes through the Hells Canyon system to actually push smolt downstream to ensure their survivability. So because of the existence of the Snake River dams and because of their impact on our fish, we're actually pushing more Idaho water out of state. If we had healthy fish numbers, we would keep that water. And I have a hunch that Idaho farmers want to retain that 487,000 acre feet. And your other comment is we have these record numbers. It's just a fact that we did not have record numbers this year. We had a bump in the numbers, but we have never had the returns that we had pre-dam. And I've had folks say, and I'm a salmon fisherman myself, I remember the good years, 2001, 2009. We had, I'd call it a bumper crop that year, but we have these thresholds that are goals for returns. It's about 120,000 wild steelhead and similar number for Chinook, and I may be getting those numbers confused, but they're pretty close. During those years that people say we got record returns, we only got to about 70,000 wild fish, and our goal was 120,000. And we used to get far beyond 120,000. So we've never actually got record returns since the dams have been in place. And this year was good. I went salmon fishing. We had a season for Chinook on the Clearwater, which we have not had in years, but we were only able to keep 1 a day. We used to be able to keep 9 fish a day, even more back in the day. So these were not record numbers. It was great, but salmon populations fluctuate, and this was small. We were still only we were way under 40% of what our goal is for wild fish. And the other thing that's really important to distinguish.
There's a lot of talking here, Brian.
last moment. There is a difference between hatchery fish and wild fish. Wild fish are listed. This is what a judge will look at when it comes to the management of our dams. Hatchery fish do not represent recovery of a species.
Well, how does this address the seals that are eating the majority of the fish?
Seals and sea lions.
Yeah, my man Ted here, KIDO Talk Radio. Ted's a real man. He does all these things.
Yeah.
He's not happy with you, buddy.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine. So
thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. The Idaho Wildlife Federation was the only...
Are you going to go after seals now?
We were the only sporting organization to lobby in favor of an amendment to the Marine Mammals Protection Act of 1972 that
We've lost our mind here that you know this stuff.
Yes, that changed it so we can now lethally cull seal and sea lion populations. But guess what, Kevin?
What does that mean? Kill them?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to kill the sea lions and the seals for the fish?
With clubs and all. No.
You're just joking,
We are just joking with that. It's a little bit more humane. But, it's not a great look to some people who want seals and sea lions. But we did it. We took a lot of criticism for it because we are all hands on deck. We are in a critical red line, even with this improvement of fish numbers this year, which, by the way, you need to have 3 consistent years of high runs in order to maintain the next generation of fish. We are killing seals and sea lions. It's still not working. They kill 0.0003% of Idaho's fish. Dams are responsible for 50%.
It's all about the dams. We're going to get into that, Mr. Brooks.
Excellent.
Next, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. If you're in the wildlife community, we want to hear from you. And Mr. Brooks is well prepared, which makes one of us, but that's where you come in to get the other side of the story. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And by the way, Mr. Brooks, your website?
www.idahowildlife.org.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Tom Munns, TomMunns.com, Munns Tom Twitter for Mr. Brooks and blowing up the dams.
Man, Kevin, I would really hope that I first have to commend Mr. Brooks. The fact that he's openly willing to come on the radio and take it. He sounds like he's a great guy. I'd love to be able to visit with him at length. Man, I just wish you could do like an hour because I can't.
Me too.
It's difficult to be able to hit all this. So,
well, the way he's talking about the seals, we might be here for an hour, but we'll see.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody wants to listen to me for an hour, and maybe if they do, that's something we can consider later. But Mr. Brooks, I had a couple of questions, and maybe it's best if I just throw up all over you and then have you answer wherever you feel like you want to. I've been studying the issue plaguing the globe called the Great Reset. If you back up, it's been known by other names like Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, sustainable development, smart growth, public-private partnerships. Obviously, wildlife is a huge part of that, including the restriction of water, food, land, transportation control, surveillance, healthcare, government, and the wealth transfer by the elite. I'm going through the government documentation that includes things like deforestation, forest and droughts, mountain ecosystems, biological diversity, biotechnology. The one thing I'd really like to ask is, and I was actually a longtime supporter of the Idaho Wildlife, the Wildlife Federation when I grew up. Have you ever heard of sustainable development? Are you aware of the connection to Agenda 2030? The move toward the global governance of the UN that's now openly talked about through the World Economic Forum, the term the Great Reset, what that means to you, and are you at all related in any way under the United Nations certified NGO or a non-governmental organization?
I'll answer the last one because that's the easiest. No, we are not. We're a 5-person staff. We have offices in Idaho. We have no connection to anybody really but ourselves and our membership in Idaho. And I'm sensing that there's a lot of loaded context behind a lot of the other questions here, but maybe I can simplify this by saying I am unaware of a lot of the global buzzwords and ties into the other communities and stuff like that. I grew up hunting and fishing in Idaho. Running a nonprofit is not what I went to school for. Because I hunt and fish, kind of answering or fully Kevin's question, how I got into this. I grew up hunting and fishing. I went to college and I wanted to learn how all that works and how, I grew up in Idaho. How can we harvest timber? How can we mine? How can we use water for the things that humans need in a way that also maintains my hunting and fishing. It's as simple as that. And
would you be at least willing to communicate with me off the air at some
Absolutely.
point? Maybe Kevin can connect us off air. I'd love to talk to you about this in detail. I'm very, very concerned about it, and if you're not aware of it, perhaps I could share something with you, and perhaps you can reciprocate. But if Kevin could do that, that would be great, because Idaho needs it. I think the more information, I think you'll totally agree, because you sound like an Idahoan. The dam breaching thing that Simpson's talking about.
Well, no, Mr. Brooks. No. Mr. Brooks is in with Mr. Simpson. He wants to blow up the dams.
That's what I'm saying. And Simpson was saying, and Simpson was literally openly lying to the people, saying that he wasn't, this wasn't in any way related to anything other than this sort of idea that he just came up, that just randomly came out of nowhere. And I can tell you that that's ultimately false. And if that's the lie that he's propagating, then he is openly a liar. But,
all right, Tom Munns, we appreciate your shout-out to Congressman Simpson at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. That's a lot. So you're not affiliated with the United Nations. Do you know anything about Agenda 2030?
I don't know anything about 2030. I've heard a little bit about Agenda 21. I've been accused of being associated with it. I Googled it. It sounds like it was some resolution that United Nations came up with in the 90s, maybe, Kevin, if you're nodding. Yeah. And I don't. Look, we advocate for hunting and fishing, which means we need to advocate for things that benefit wildlife and access to them. And if people want to throw that into some United Nation agenda or resolution, they're welcome to do that. I don't receive. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, you guys are George Soros funded." Well, I'm still waiting on the check. But we just advocate for hunting and fishing. We have to advocate for wildlife and access and public lands and all that kind of stuff. So
what happens if you don't?
What
happens if there's people just go, well, we got the deer, they come in downtown Boise, or we're just going to run wild and free? Why is it so important to, again, people like me that are in the supermarkets and they go, well, as long as I got chunky tuna, I'll be okay. Or I can get a salmon from the guy at Fred Meyer.
No, that's a good point. I think we don't work for everybody, right? If there aren't elk on the mountainside, you're probably not going to be. You can't sell elk meat. You can produce it on an agricultural level. You can grow elk. You can't with mule deer or whitetail deer or anything like that. It's actually part of the North American model of wildlife management is taking wildlife out of the traditional market. Because once you monetize that, you see the depletion of the resources. Because this is a common resource, this belongs to everybody. It's a trust. It's a great equalizer. A billionaire gets the same opportunity as a 16-year-old who's done with school on a Friday to grab his rifle and go out into the hills north of Fairfield or wherever in Idaho. So in Idaho, because you're a billionaire, you don't get to cut in the line and hunt wild game.
On the other hand, though, you have the Wilkes brothers and people buying up a bunch of land and keeping it for themselves, even with private security.
Well, hey, but if they want to do what they want with private land, that's their.
But then they cut off access to people's roads and their houses and all sorts of things.
Well, there is a problem when you buy private land and you shut off a public road, even if there's a recorded easement in a deed or there's a prescriptive easement. That's when we have a problem. Feel free to do what you want with private land. That's on you. And if you have the money to buy your own hunting preserve, that's great. That sounds awesome. I'd love that. But I don't have the right to shut down a public road.
Let's go to Constitutional Jack with Mr. Brooks on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Mr. Brooks and Kevin. What is the science showing as to the effects of the Japanese nuclear reactor Fukushima melting down and spewing radioactivity into the Pacific? And they can't stop. The Japanese can't stop this radioactivity, which the currents of those Pacific currents flow to and against Washington and Oregon and Alaskan coasts, radiating the ocean life there. And my question, in conjunction with that, are the salmon radioactive? Have you tested that? And are they safe to eat off these coasts? Many restaurants I know will not buy, and supermarkets will not buy Pacific fish. They buy Atlantic things, you know. So why do we need to blow up the dams if these fish are they radioactive, and why do we need to blow up the dams if they are radioactive and they're not healthy to eat anyway?
Let's let Mr. Brooks answer the question.
You know, I'm not the most familiar with the science of the impacts of Fukushima, but as far as we know, it's very minimal, or at least no more or less radioactive than what is found naturally in some radioactive substances in the soil. The main reason that we know that fish are unhealthy is other ocean contaminants. It's called a bioaccumulation, whether it's toxins from plastics or lead or anything else. There's actually that poses far more health risk to people, and that's not just in salmon. That's in all large fish in the ocean, and frankly, it's in deer and elk and a lot of whole other animals as well, from all manner of human exploitation or energy creation and stuff like that. So, as far as we know, the levels of radioactivity in the salmon and steelhead that come back to Idaho, specifically those species, is negligible, as far as I've been told.
Have you heard that a number of fishing people up in Alaska are out of business because of the radioactivity? Have you heard about that? And have you... Go ahead.
Oh, no. Sorry, go ahead. No, finish, please.
And have you tested for Geiger counter on the salmon that are coming up into Idaho? Those two questions.
That's a lot. Okay, Constitutional Jack.
Let me have you...
Okay.
Are you aware that a lot of fishing companies have shut down?
Okay, well, thank you, Constitutional Jack. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. We appreciate the phone call. Mr. Brooks, are we having radioactive salmon?
Not to my knowledge, and a lot of the salmon companies, the harvesters of salmon that I've heard of, it's mostly cyclical. I mean, we get some boom and bust cycles, and there's a lot more species of salmon in Alaska. There's pinks, there's silvers, there's Chinook, they call them kings, there's sockeye, and there are boom and bust cycles. Some years they don't have enough to commercially harvest. Some years, like I think last year, they had a record number returning.
Bob and Star. We'll get to Bob and Star. Bob, go ahead. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Yes, this is Bob Amaral, and the question I have is about fish ladders, the study that they've done on fish ladders, how effective they are, and also about going downstream. I heard there's, I've seen the plans to put in these big old pipes, line them up, make them more inviting for the fish to get into them and go downstream around the dam. What have you heard about them?
Yeah, so a two-part question. Fish ladders, they do work, but they only work for adult fish returning. There's still some mortality. About 16% of adults that come back into the mouth of the Columbia River die from the exertion. As you can imagine, the Snake River, except for a few notable exceptions before the dams were built, like Celilio Falls, didn't really have many rapids to climb up. And so there is some natural exertion that kills some fish, but it's fairly minimal. The big killer from the dams is the oceanward migration. These fish are about the size of your pinky, and they used to go to the ocean with their tail downstream, their head upstream. They'd be flushed out. And so that natural sort of spring freshet would get them to the river as fast as, in some cases, 48 days. Now that can take 48 hours, 2 days. Now that takes up to 40 days. And that's what's killing our fish. They need to get to that sort of ocean water to start feeding. As far as pipes built around, there's a lot of different things we could do. It's far less expensive. And remember, this all has to be funded by somebody, and it's going to be the American taxpayer or ratepayer that goes through BPA. The easiest solution while the dams are in place is to spill as much water as possible. That basically does the same thing pipes do. And all we have to do is just open a valve, right? Instead of boring and tunneling and pouring cement and getting natural light into these tunnels and then coaxing the smolt to actually go in there. The other problem we see with getting fish into small areas is that we are setting up a buffet line for walleye and bass and pike minnow. We're subsidizing a really great walleye fishery on some of those reservoirs, and we should stop doing that.
What does it mean to... okay, Bob, did you get the answer there?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio. So, in 30 seconds, how does that translate to the rest of us that are going, why is Kevin Miller talking about fish ladders? How is that important to the overall, environment of the state of Idaho?
30 seconds? Okay.
Well, wait, we'll hold on.
Okay.
We'll get back to that in a minute. More with Mr. Brooks. He'll take more of your calls, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Beacon Plumbing brings you Fox News. KIDO Talk Radio brings you the world. Welcome back. Brian Brooks joining us as we continue on. Brian, your website again, please.
www.idahowildlife.org.
Now, we promised we'd give you some time to answer those questions concerning why is it important to people that, maybe they drive a hybrid, maybe they, don't want to go glamping, maybe they like to ski, maybe they don't. Why is what you do important? Why is being good stewards of the land and the animals so important?
Well, it comes down to the primary tenet of how we manage our resources is there's three pillars. It has to be economically viable, socially acceptable, and environmentally conscious. I mean, we need those three things to act in unison to really have a flourishing society. And that idea comes out of the collapse of many societies that have come before us, folks that neglected maybe the environment, and you like Rome, and let's talk about the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and then we really realize the importance of maintaining soil and making sure that we can grow our crops. So it's not just environmental; it's also food production and stuff like that. When I talk about ecology, but you also have to have things that are socially acceptable. Otherwise, people are going to riot, right? I mean, I think maybe that's too close of a topic right now these days. But you've got to have the environment and the systems with which we rely on to eat and to enjoy and to provide what are called environmental services, whether it's water filtration, growing our lumber, growing and providing some of our minerals and the things that we need. You need to have a balanced sort of look at all three of those things. And of course, where I come from, the things that my organization works for, we work for sustaining fish and wildlife and our ability to pursue them. That is sometimes a hobby. That is sometimes a lifestyle, a hobby that's glorified or amplified. It is a business. For Idaho, it's big business. Idaho Outfitters and Guides is a very large industry, and most of those people live in towns of 500 or less, so it's a very rural industry. But it's also something that puts meat on in people's freezers and feeds their family. And I know that some folks that maybe...
Now, hold on. We'll get to that in a second with all due respect. Glenn's on the job, so...
Let's do it.
Glenn wanted to come back, and he's ready for the dam buster. Go ahead. He sounds pretty logical to me, Mr. Brooks does. Glenn, what about you?
He does. As humans, it is our nature to change our environment. That's the way that humankind is. And we have to find a balance in how we do that. And my question is two things. These dams provide electric power that is clean and renewable. And is there a plan to replace that power? And what is that plan? Because we have basically free electricity here as long as the water is running. And if we switch to a different kind of power, how do we mitigate the damage that's going to do to the environment in other ways? Second is...
Well, hold on. Before you do that, hold on, but we'll get lost in that. So you're not going anywhere. All right, Mr. Brooks, part one.
Glenn, these are the questions I really wanted to get to, because those are the questions people have. How's this going to impact my power bill? And those dams...
Yeah, Idaho Power...
They have dams.
Yeah. And they need to quit selling stuff to California and lower my electric bill.
I'd like that as well.
We agree, Mr. Brooks.
We agree.
You do not want high electric bills.
I do not want that.
Well, if you blow up the dams, there we go, Mr. Brooks. I'm paying for you and your fish.
What if I told you you're already paying for my fish? So, here we're going to get into this.
I believe that now.
Yeah, okay. So, important to know, Idaho Wildlife Federation, we would not be supporting taking out any dams until all of the services they provide are replaced. And that is not just power production. They also provide transportation, mostly for ag commodities. Wheat, typically grown in Palouse area, 90% of the commodities shipped through the lower Four Snake River dams is wheat. And that is only 140 miles from Lewiston to the Tri-Cities. Let's keep that in mind. This is water transport for 140 miles. It's not too long, but it is seemingly too long for Idaho's fish, or too many dams, I should say. So there are plans to replace the power that the Snake River dams provide. And it's really important to get some context here, and I'll be brief, Kevin. Those dams were a part of they're managed under BPA. They market the power that is created by those dams. They were built by the Army Corps of Engineers. They were part of the New Deal.
Yeah, the WPA. Yeah.
Yep, New Deal. And so they started planning all these power production facilities to be built in the Pacific Northwest. And by the time they built the lower four dams, started in planning in the late 40s, in the 50s, and they were completed. I think the first dam was completed in the early 60s. So this is pretty old technology, but these are also run-of-the-river dams. They're not big.
Is he stalling? I mean, we don't need a history lesson, do we,
Okay.
Glenn? Are we good?
They're not storage facilities.
Glenn, are you with us?
I'm still here.
I'm trying to.
Yeah,
when he's going to answer the
gonna get
question,
more
I mean,
power.
I think he thinks that we're simpletons.
All right. So in a year, the 4 lower Snake River dams together produce about 960 megawatts of power. We can replace that. It's not a whole lot of power. If you take McNary Dam, which is on the lower Columbia, it produces over 4 times that, just one dam. So these dams do produce power. It's not a whole lot. They're run-of-river. They don't store water, so they can't produce the same amount of electricity all throughout the year. When we really need it, in the summer months and the winter months when we're doing heaters and AC units, the water is so low, we produce less than 40 megawatts a month for all 4 dams. It's really little. And when we don't need it in the spring, when the water's gushing through, that power is sold at a loss.
Sean says this is insane. We are purposely destroying our power.
So what I'm telling you is the power is not a lot, and we sell it at a loss. So it's tough to talk about this without going into the history, and I'm not going to do that. But the Army Corps built so many dams.
But how are they going to replace it? You haven't said how you're going to replace it.
How are you going to replace it? Yes, Mr. Brooks.
We don't need to replace a whole lot of energy, but there is an all of the above strategy. It can be hydro on other sections of river that are more efficient, that are not 80-year-old technology. There is hydro called pump storage, where you develop a reservoir on land and you run it through turbines downhill, and then when they don't need the power, they actually use solar and wind to pump the water back up.
There isn't a solid plan yet to replace the power.
What's that?
I said, so what you're saying is there is not a solid plan yet to replace the power.
But you want to blow up the dams.
What I'm saying is, no, I didn't say that. It's an all of the above strategy. In fact, the Nez Perce tribe right now is building their own power generation facility with solar and battery storage. Now, I know that solar has some political context to it. Let's just pretend that they're producing their own power.
What does solar do to the environment?
What's that?
Because you're covering all that land, so what's that going to do to the wildlife where you build the solar? I mean,
all energy generation has an impact. All energy generation has an impact on the environment. The question is, do we want energy that's going to cause the extinction of one of our iconic fish, which has a culture and industry built around it? So we can replace the power.
Now we're salmon privilege. This is salmon privilege.
We have nuclear. We have modular nuclear that's coming online in INL. You can plug in a 6-pack of modular nuclear reactors in Hanford. Hanford already exists north of the Tri-Cities. You can do pump storage. You can do other hydro dams on non-anadromous fish rivers. You can do a mixture of wind, solar, and batteries. There are natural gas, geothermal. We have the ability.
Not according to Joe Biden.
Well, here, let me say, and this is all theorized.
Now, wait a minute, Mr. Brooks. You can't filibuster, with all due respect. Glenn?
Well, I don't think he's got an answer to the first question, how they're going to replace the power. And he touched a little bit on my second question.
Well, I just gave you about 7 different ways that we can produce alternative power.
Ability to move stuff up and down the river through barges when you take the dams out.
So I gave you about 7 different examples of how we can generate alternative power, all which are examples that are already happening in our country. And let me put it this way. The PUDs, these are the public utility districts and the power co-ops across the Pacific Northwest, already have requests for proposals, RFPs out, that for new power generation facilities, and they range from natural gas to other greener technology, if you want to use that term, that far surpass the production of the lower Snake River dams. I'm talking 10,000 megawatt projects. And remember, the lower 4 Snake River dams just produce 1,000. And so some of those PUDs are producing one power generation facility that can produce.
Imagine when you do that when there's no one here to cover for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you nervous? You see, you're burping now.
Oh, I'm excited. I've drank a quart of coffee.
The dams to newer technology.
Say that again?
Why not upgrade the dams to newer technology so they make more power?
Well, so here's the problem is that we have the concrete. So we're not going to blow up the dams, by the way. We're just going to take out the earthen portion and leave the concrete. If we ever needed the dams again, we can actually plug them back up and use them again.
That sounds easier said than done, Glenn.
Well, I'm no engineer, but they designed them that way, and those people were smarter than I were. Wait
a minute. You're talking about you're going to blow up the dams, but you're not going to blow up the dams, but we can build back the dams and there's no alternative.
If we ever need them, if we ever need them in the future. Yeah.
I got Sean saying this is insane. Solar, wind, my goodness, Mr. Brooks. What happened in Texas?
Well,
it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I noticed that Sean is also leaving out the fact that I mentioned modular nuclear, other hydro, natural gas as well. So we're conveniently forgetting that I am bringing up other viable, already in practice power generation facilities. But here's the deal. It's only 1,000 megawatts. We have requests for proposals, RFPs out by the people who generate power and manufacture these facilities that far surpass and those are going to be coming online in the next 10, 20 years. So we're already slated to replace the dam power by more than magnitudes of orders. So to say that, oh, this is all theory, it's not true. These projects are already getting going. So the problem is that other people need to consider these dams are going to be obsolete. They were only planned to be here for 80 years. So what's going to happen in the next...
All right, Glenn, thank you. And don't mean to cut you off, Mr. Brooks. Let's go to Ron Grant. Ron Grant joining us now to talk a little bit about, what's coming up on Saturday on the Saturday show. Ron, what do you think of Mr. Brooks so far?
Boy, that was a heavy conversation there, buddy.
I know. We need some levity. What's coming up on Saturday?
I don't know. That's a tough one to follow. Well, we're gonna educate. Kevin, you and I are going to educate as we do every Saturday, and mostly every Saturday is live, so we take your calls on how to keep that money that you already work so hard for. That's called the principal and the gains 100% safe, where you can't lose it. And then we're going to educate you on how you can have a guaranteed lifetime income, of course, that the traditional retirement plans just don't offer you. We're also going to talk to Will Hart. He's our metal man, gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. And, Kevin, it's the physical metals that we want to talk to you about, not the paper stuff your broker sells you that you can lose money on like I did back in the mid-'80s. So make sure you tune in on Saturday. Get your pen, your paper ready. We're going to educate you on how to keep that safe. And Mr. Miller and I are looking forward to it, right?
Yeah, maybe we could bring in Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, a super non-controversial topic like dam breaching.
All right.
I don't know.
You watch out.
If we have that much time.
Exactly. Ron, your website and phone number, people want to get a hold of you?
Yes, sir. Great educational website, safermoneyspecialist.com. There's some third-party articles, some third-party videos that you can take a peek at. And then phone number 208-660-1372. I'm local right here in the Treasure Valley to help you.
Thank you, Ron. We'll see you Saturday.
Thank you, buddy. Stay safe.
All right. He didn't really say anything to you, Mr. Brooks.
No, I noticed that.
All right. We've got Al in Ontario, pro-life, and we also have a question. We'll answer this in a minute. Does Mr. Brooks have any information regarding the oversight hearing on the Columbia Snake River salmon recovery on October 8th, 1998? What about the information work from Congresswoman Helen Chenoweth back in the day? More on that in a minute. Back to the questions there, Mr. Brooks. You weren't familiar with Helen Chenoweth and the Salmon Act back in 1998. You said you'd look it up, though.
I just didn't have enough time here, but I'm unfamiliar with the time. Helen Chenoweth was before my political awakening. I think I was still in grade school.
I was going to say, you probably were a little kid.
But I do remember her pointing out that how can salmon be endangered? I can still see cans of it on the shelves at the grocery store.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Before we get going here, I want to remind you of our friend Aaron and Joel, our friends. Last weekend, T. Mazda and the Pre-Owned Superstore did a special Black Friday offer where they doubled the value of Visa gift cards that included with the vehicle purchase. Instead of a $1,000 gift card, you can get a $2,000 Visa gift card. Guess what? They're going to repeat that through this Sunday. Buy now, new or used T. Mazda, and they'll include a $2,000 Visa gift card that can certainly help you with your holiday spending. Maybe you'd like to buy some salmon. You could afford that with the $2,000 Visa gift card from T. Mazda. This is another way they'll help you with the holiday cash flow, is that you can buy now and make no payments until March. New car today, no payments until March. And it's easy to get pre-approved with Team's iPrecheck pre-approval. Simply click the big blue iPrecheck button to go Team Mazda, enter your name, address, and get instantly pre-approved. That's when you get to the dealership. They'll show you the vehicles that you're already qualified to buy, pre-qualified. iPrecheck doesn't require your Social Security number, and it won't affect your credit. $2,000 Visa gift card, no payments until March. iPrecheck pre-approval only at Team Mazda, the Pre-Owned Superstore at the Boulevard in Caldwell. Online anytime, go teammazda.com. Aaron and Joel do such a terrific job, and we really, really appreciate their fine work, and they will get you the lowest rate and not make you car poor. All right, before we get back to this, Mr. Brooks, we're giving you an opportunity here before we go on to the next hour. We've kind of cut you off a little, but you believe that this is the best rationale of sustainability. Does it really come down to the fish and our energy in this issue?
No, it doesn't. We can have both. Like I said, there was a time and place for hydropower, and not all dams are created equal. Some are incredibly valuable. The power they provide it far surpasses the amount of power generated by the lower Forest Snake River dams. But we can have both. These dams have had usefulness, but we have seen other power generating projects come online, and the market with which we used to sell the surplus power generated by a lot of BPA projects, including lower four dams, is gone. And there's nobody buying it. We used to sell it to California, and because they're producing a lot of their own power, mostly through wind and solar and some other projects, nobody's buying it, and it's sold at a loss. And if you're a BPA customer, 30% of your power bill pays for failed federal fish recovery efforts. So there are some power utility districts and co-ops, let's just say the Salmon River Co-op that serves salmon and chalice. They're a captive market to BPA. They don't have a choice to buy power from anywhere else. They don't have a choice to send 30% of their power bill to fish recovery efforts that are failing. And those are towns that are on the Salmon River who are not seeing the benefits of that money that is being taken from them. So this is a big federal bloated bureaucracy, BPA. It was created under the New Deal. It does not have a commission, say, like the Tennessee Valley Authority. They just have an administrator, and they have very little oversight. So I think
I'm very familiar with the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Yeah,
I spent some time there.
Yeah, so this is, I think, what should be relating to, and this is the meat of what I want to talk to, what's changing a lot of minds, is the fact that that we have a lot of anti-federal sentiment in Idaho, and rightfully so. Well, this is here a large federal program. These are federal dams. They take 30% of people's power bill. They're putting into a failed fish recovery effort, and this is fish recovery is, like I said, it's not just about people getting the thrill of having a fish on the end of a line. This is business in rural places in Idaho. We have economic data of what Chinook and steelhead bring to Idaho communities. And so
even the people that live in the subdivisions and, are not intuitively, want to go out and hunt and fish. Yeah. Look, I have a thing against people that drive big trucks. Those are big darn trucks. Now, they're more of a man than I am, but there are a lot of people, some people don't like the big trucks, but it's a lifestyle thing. What you're saying, Mr. Brooks, in all seriousness, is this impacts all of us, not just the hunting and the fishing people. These decisions.
A resilient economy is a diverse economy. That is
running for office. I can't even pronounce those words.
That is economics 101. So the more diversity you have, inputs into an economy, the more it can weather downturns. When you go to a town like Orofino, we actually had to shut down the steelhead season in 2017. We were able to measure the loss of economic income compared to the years when they had steelhead. And that's the only economic driver in the winter there.
And let's continue that in a minute. Sure. Brian, Pro-Life, Al, and Tea Party Bob next with Mr. Brooks. Beacon Plumbing bringing you Fox News. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. We care about Idaho, and this is how we give back to our great state. Again, I don't happen to be an expert on the wildlife and the fishing game, but we do have Brian Brooks joining us here on KIDO Talk Radio to make sure that we get all sides of the story. Mr. Brooks is the executive director of the Idaho Wildlife Federation. And is that your website is?
www.idahowildlife.org.
idahowildlife.org. We're probably going to have you back if we don't get to it this hour. Just the balance between, we do, obviously, everybody who's anybody watches Yellowstone. Okay?
Yeah.
Do you watch Yellowstone, or are you too busy, taking bark off the tree or whatever you people do? Exactly.
I'm too busy shooting birds.
Okay. I happen to be, you would be anti-duck. I would be pro-duck.
Oh.
People have, and I'm sorry, I apologize for this. People have said, well, I need to go out in the duck blind. I go, dude, I love the ducks too much. I'm not killing ducks. Anyway,
I'm a big anti-duck guy, yeah.
I'm showing my my pro-animal activist side here. But the whole theme of that show is you have people moving in from California, like here. Look, you're a native, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have context to everything in your beloved state, your state that you have chosen to live in, to stay, to spend money into what does it mean to you when we have this massive amount of culture change coming in, and we'll keep you out of the political realm of people wanting to have their own version of Yellowstone here,
right.
And not as respectful as someone who hey, man, a camping fee, that costs a lot of money. A hunting license, that costs a lot of money. And so you're respectful because you have to earn it. So culturally, as a native Idahoan, as someone who is in this industry, what do you think is going on?
I think it can be scary. Yeah, people who have grown up here and seeing the changes. But the good news is, people, when you say people want their own Yellowstone, I think that's true. The Wilkes brothers are a good example of that, buying up literally hundreds of thousands of acres, and they get their own little piece of private Idaho. But the flip side of that is that Idahoans have 2/3 of the state that belong to them. We have public lands, and I know that there are problems with public land management.
The feds own them.
The people own them. Well, the feds manage them. It's a trust for the public. And you get to use them, Kevin. I know that you're a pro duck guy, so you might not be out there a lot, but you get to go out there whenever you want for free and do what you like out there.
I'm just glad that most of these places have like the public restrooms.
Right. Yeah. No, that's important for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Typically where I go, these are undeveloped public lands. There's not a lot of restrooms, and so it weeds out a lot of the folks like you.
I really admire, as you should, I admire the WPA that built those public restrooms with that old technology. But in all seriousness, you have, and we'll just use the Wilkes brothers. And have you talked to the Wilkes brothers?
I've talked to representatives that work for them.
Yeah. What's their vibe? Because we hear so much. And by the way, the Wilkes brothers, people that love conservatism, they're the backers of the Daily Wire.
Sure.
They're the ones that put in Ben Shapiro. And then on the other hand, they're the big money folks from Texas coming to Idaho.
Yeah, and it's important not to vilify anybody. And I'll reiterate this: you can do with private land what you please. If you buy it and by fair means and willing seller, willing buyer, do all that you to your heart's desire. But it's really important to remember that. Well, let me answer your question here. The people I've worked with, I've been out in the forest when Wilkes Brothers employees, sort of bottom of the ladder guys, have been installing locks on gates. Those dudes are from rural Idaho. They're doing a job. They're getting paid. They have guns on their hips. And, I kind of asked them, like, wasn't this a public road? And this was the Boise Ridge Road, which has been opened up now. Found out that it was a public road. And they're just doing their jobs. They're making ends meet.
Why are they carrying a gun?
That's a really good question. I think that comes off to people that live in places like Idaho City, rural Boise County, where a lot of Wilkes brothers. That's a fairly alarming tactic for just, hey, if for most. I mean, a lot of people in Idaho carry guns. I have many guns myself.
Look, I'm all about people carrying guns, but when you're in the woods and armed and you're not hunting and you're locking people out of roads.
Well, and when you're locking hunters out of roads who are carrying guns. In fact, I had a gun, and there was another guy hunting grouse on that road. So there's two opposite parties here with guns, and of course it did get nobody was chippy at each other. We're just trying to understand each other here. But the other folks that work for the Wilkes brothers are often lawyers and lobbyists who work in the Idaho State House, and that's where I rub elbows with them. And they come off as lawyers typically come off.
The Wilkes brothers do have a lobbying presence in the Capitol.
Yeah, many.
What's that, Sweet William? Oh, you're telling me be careful of the Wilkes brothers. They might buy KIDO Talk Radio and Times Square Media and fire you. Well, they could. They have a lot of money to do that. Whether it's the Wilkes brothers or the Chinese, this might be our last show, Mr. Brooks. So,
well, it was good to be on here.
Well, I'm glad that you approved it. Let's go to Brian in Nampa with Mr. Brooks from the Idaho Wildlife Federation. Good morning, Brian. One native Idahoan to another, you and Mr. Brooks.
Both Brians.
Yeah, very good.
Hey.
Mr. Brooks, I'm sorry. I don't want to be informal. Please go ahead, Brian.
You brought up the gun thing, Kevin, and I'm the first cousin 3 times removed from John Brown, and I can tell you why we pack guns here in Idaho. It's just not hunting. There's 2-legged predators in the state. I mean, the local news has just proven that. I wonder if things would have been any different up in Moscow if we had IDF girls up there with AR-15 strung on their back.
I'm not vilifying the guns. Look, you come to a Miller's Mission event, and there's Terry packing, there's Tea Party Bob packing. It scares the people in the building when people come in carrying guns. But my question being to Mr. Brooks is, when you have people that are cutting off access and packing, to me that and again, this is my sissy vibe coming out, that seems more like intimidation.
I would go up to them and, hey, guys, what you packing? What kind of barrel? That kind of stuff.
Well, yes, of course you would, yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're all going to die. You got to get over that sooner or later, It's just how it's going to happen. Hey, so how long have you been in Idaho, your family? Not a just honest question.
Yeah, Mr. Brooks. We're going to qualify you as an Idahoan. Go ahead,
Oh boy,
Mr. Brooks.
I'm first generation. My parents are not. But
Okay.
yeah,
So you came to the state
So-
legally,
I
and
did.
you were born in this
yeah,
state.
Yeah,
Okay, well, just make it sure.
yeah. No, I
where was your family from before that?
my dad's side of the family is from Wisconsin, farming town. My mom's side of the family is from California. Now, don't kill me.
It's okay,
yeah,
Mr. Brooks.
we all come
you
from somewhere.
You appear to be friendly.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
a tolerant crew.
That's fine. You said your dad was a farming town, right?
Yeah, farming community for sure. And
Okay,
we still have the
so-
farm actually.
Yeah, full disclosure, I am a rancher's son from eastern Idaho. So you talked about power. Okay, as soon as my power bill, my natural gas bill goes down, I'm for it. Second concern, though, is, and Kevin knows this, you know this, we've been in a drought. What about water? Because to the farmers in eastern Idaho, and presumably all over the state, water is a big deal. So I love fish. My brother's an avid fisherman. He makes money off of it too. But if you dry up the wheat and the hay, you lost me. So how do you address the
Yes, Brian.
water?
How do you address the drought, Brian?
Yes, thank you, Brian. No, that's an excellent question, and frankly, for someone like you, I'm not. That's your bottom line. You have to know where your water is coming from. But the good news is, out-of-state dams, these dams do not store water for anybody's purposes, especially in Idaho. There are irrigators in Washington that rely on the water level of the dams, but the Columbia Snake River Irrigators Association, this is somebody who represents many irrigators on that sort of western end of the Palouse and going towards the Columbia Crescent. They've come to the table and actually they've proposed a 2-dam breach scenario. But they have actually come to the table and said, well, if the dams are breached, we need about $17 million to extend our pipes further down to the new water line, and we need to, because of the extension of the pipes, we need a bigger horsepower engine or a pump system to pump that water uphill a little bit farther. So we can do things differently. We need different infrastructure if we're going to take out the dams. But for you in particular in eastern Idaho, because of the Nez Perce agreement, because our fish are being hurt by the stagnation of 4 reservoirs, we need water from somewhere to flush those fish downstream when they're going to the ocean. Excuse me. We send 487.
You need some more water?
I've got plenty. I've had.
Well, you need to take a drink.
I know, right?
Hey, go ahead. Is this answering your question, Brian? Because we've come a long way from his dad being a farmer. I'm confused.
And
So
yeah, go ahead, Brian.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah, see, that's what. Why can't he just answer the question, Brian?
So, Brian, the short answer is the existence of the dams.
Let me explain.
Sure.
So, eastern Idaho, more specific, Manan, Idaho. All of my family's land is fed by dams.
Yes.
So,
Mr. Brooks.
Yes.
How are you going? That's the question, and it's just an honest question. They're already in trouble. So,
No, that's a good question.
How are you going to address it?
The answer is not all dams are created equal. Some are incredibly valuable. The ones that feed your area are incredibly valuable. The dams on the lower Four Snake River are not storage facilities. They don't store water for long periods of time to water crops throughout the summer. They're not like Lucky Peak. They're not like Dorshack. They're not like Magic Valley Reservoir. They're run-of-the-river dams. They just produce power, and they just provide transportation for the ag industry. 2 services that can be replaced. But it is people in eastern Idaho, like your family, and I don't know specifically if your family is tied into this, but we have to send down 487,000 acre-feet. I know you know how much water that is. That is an ocean, practically, in eastern Idaho. We have to send downstream to benefit fish because of the impacts the lower Four Snake River dams have on our fish. If we take out the dams and fish come back, you guys get that water back. I know it sounds paradoxical, but it's the existence of the 4 lower dams that is forcing Idahoans to send water downstream. I think you guys want that water back.
All right, Brian, thank you for the call. One line open. Al, we're going to get to you, Tea Party Bob, Pro-Life, and Mr. Brooks. Quick break next. Welcome back. Kevin Miller in the morning. Again, Mr. Brooks joining us from the Idaho Wildlife Federation. Mr. Brooks, 20 seconds. Anything you'd like to say before we get back to the phone calls?
Great questions. We love it. Keep firing away.
All right, we continue. Al in Ontario for Mr. Brooks, who says he's not associated with George Soros or Agenda 2030.
Good morning, Mr. Brooks. Just wondering, are you familiar with the concept energy return on energy invested?
No. Feel free to enlighten me.
You don't know of EROI, energy return on energy invested? Okay, well, good. I'm glad I had the ability to educate you this morning. The reality is this. Hydro has an EROI, energy return on energy invested, of about 35. Okay, so let's just say, for instance, you were down, at Spindletop in 1901, and you use 1 barrel of oil to produce 100 barrels of oil. You'd have a 1 to 100 return on your energy. Okay, so what you have to always do is you have to use your energy to produce energy, right? So hydroelectric has about a 35. Do you know what photovoltaic cells have? About a 4. Okay, so there is even coal is only about 30. Okay, so hydroelectric is the most effective, most efficient form of generating electricity there is. Okay, there's no better than that. Consequently, do you know how much energy it takes to actually produce that facility, that dam, those production capabilities to produce that energy? Tons and tons of energy to produce that energy that you're actually using. Now, let's go over to photovoltaic that you're talking about. Oh, well, yeah. Oh, I guess the Indians
are you familiar with that term, photovoltaic?
I am I'm familiar with the term, but let's be clear. I have advocated for a top-down approach, which includes nuclear, other hydro as well.
You two may be familiar with that, but what does that mean for me? What does that mean?
Yeah, solar panels.
Solar panels. You're speaking over our heads, guys.
Okay, so solar panels, okay. Well, what's the basic constituent for those? Would that be polysilicon by any chance? Do you know where polysilicon is made, my friend?
China.
You guessed it right, Kevin. It's China. And how do they make
smart,
the
Kevin.
polysilicon?
Not as smart as I look.
Yeah, how do they make the polysilicon? With coal. Massive amounts of coal are used. They build a coal power plant every week. So what you're actually doing, okay, is you're polluting the environment with this coal power plants, polluting the atmosphere in order to make the polysilicon, okay, to make all of these solar cells. So consequently, what you're really proposing here is destroying the absolute most effective generation of electricity there practically is on Earth, the most environmentally friendly energy production on Earth.
Let's
you
let
want
Mr.
to
Brooks,
destroy that.
Let's let Mr. Brooks respond.
I'd contend that, again, not all dams are created equal. And again, I'll reiterate this, that I am not advocating for replacing the 960 megawatts produced annually by the Lower Forest Snake River dams with entirely solar. Again, there are other hydro projects, in-river hydro projects. They can be dams. They can be modernized water wheels down the river that do not obstruct the flow of the river and therefore the migration of salmon. It can be modular nuclear reactors. It's an all of the above, all of which are tools that we already employ and are being developed as we speak. So to say, and again, some people like to say, oh, well, it would take 3 or 4 coal-fired power plants to replace the power of the dams. That might be true, but no one's advocating for actually doing that. So let's be clear on that. All of the above.
Right, but what I'm saying is this. We have expended the energy to produce these energy producers, right? We have expended the energy, massive and massive amounts of concrete, massive amounts of energy to actually produce these dams, which are energy producers. We've put that energy into it. Okay, so what you're really saying, our country is growing. The state of Idaho is growing. We're going to need more and more and more electrical power. So, we're going to have more hydroelectric. The last thing we want to do is get rid of the most environmentally friendly form of creating energy.
Great call, Al. You wanted to respond?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call infrastructure that's the single largest man-made cause of extinction of Idaho salmon and steelhead and the extinction of that industry associated with it, clean energy. But what I will ask you is, what do you think the lifetime of these dams is? And do you think that they're going to be around forever? Because eventually all things have to be reconstructed. And I mean, why don't you answer that? I mean, do you think these dams he's gone. Well, let me sorry, no rhetorical questions on the radio. The dams were not designed to be around forever. And honestly, I think people are approaching this in a way where we should do this voluntarily. What we haven't gotten to yet is that this is the fish impacted are ESA listed species. If we do not stop their extinction trajectory of the wild fish, a judge will step in and do it for us, and we will be left up a certain named creek, without any service to replace the services that the dams provide, infrastructure to replace those services. So let's look at the Klamath. This is not theory. The Klamath River, the dams that were on there are now being torn down because stakeholders, people who relied on the water, people who wanted energy, people who wanted fish, couldn't come together to come up with a solution where everyone can benefit, to the point, and while they deliberated, salmon went down, 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 to a point where a judge snapped his fingers. Those dams are coming out, and now we don't have any infrastructure to replace them. So is that where we want Idaho to be? Do we want us to be? And yes, it takes energy to build anything, but we can replace the dam. We can surpass the power generation those dams provide. Number one, they're aging out. They are outdated technology. Because of the way they're built, we can only put the certain types of turbines in there, increasing their efficiency a small amount. Or we can replace them in time to save fish, to get them back, and we can get more power produced, and we can have this investment in infrastructure in interior west, in northwest, in Lewiston, and we can get a new rail line transport to replace the ag commodity transport. We can get new things. We used to do big things in this country.
Right.
We can do it again.
That costs a lot of money.
Sure does.
Let's go to the Sideways Kid in Weiser. Hello, Sideways.
Good morning, Kevin. I wanted to speak with Mr. Brooks here. It sounds like part of your MO is to look to see the big picture. I was curious to see about if you could point me in the right direction where I can look at the studies that either maybe you've done or done with Fish and Game that show what the impact is going to be on the fisheries that are in these reservoirs if you go to do this.
I assume you're talking about the fisheries that kind of thrive in this lake-like environment, like walleye and bass and pike minnow?
Yeah, crappie, catfish, several others.
Well, there are some studies. I mean, we know that the walleye fishery will be impacted, but that only exists because we're subsidizing it with taxpayer and ratepayer dollars. We're paying for all the production of these hatchery smolts. We're sending them downstream and we're feeding walleye. So walleye will be impacted, but remember that catfish and crappie and bass also exist in places like the Snake River between dams as well, in a flowing river.
No, I understand that. But I'm just saying, has there been? I was just curious to see what in detail study was done that way. And the thing is, I understand that walleye, that steelhead, and salmon fishermen, I understand that they eat fry, and there's a lot of things, but not all of us worship at the bow of a drift boat. And I think that needs to be addressed. There's also
that's why we're here.
People, yeah, and that's the other thing is that when these reservoirs drop, the impact. I'm sure that this has been looked at. The impact on the businesses that have resorts, other surrounding things, and when those reservoirs go away, what's going to happen to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Luckily, this is the stretch between the Tri-Cities and Lewiston and Clarkston is fairly rural, and there's not a whole lot of big resorts that have this lake-like sort of atmosphere. This is still a moving river, though when it gets close to the dams, it's moving like 1 mile an hour. So these are slackwater reservoirs, and there will be impacts. This will be a big earthworks project. When the river goes down, there's going to be a lot of silt. It's going to be a big restoration economy that's going to be developed to restore this area. Lewiston will get its beaches back, but it's going to be trade-offs. But if you look at pictures of Lewiston in the 40s and 50s, there were people sunbathing on those white sand beaches between Clarkston and Lewiston. There were steelhead derbies, salmon derbies. I mean, there are things that will come back, and there will be things that we lose. That's to be sure.
Well, the last thing that I had to say, the reason that I seem to be pushing so hard on this impact thing, is that the well-meaning people in the state of California, in the effort to save the salmon and steelhead, have virtually been a failure. And because they have diverted that water flow all into the Sacramento and kept it out of the Delta, which is 1,100 miles of waterway, they virtually have wrecked that Delta. There are businesses there, cities that have folded up, all because of well-meaning and not things that have not been completely researched in the macro, and they have wrecked the Central Valley. And so before you go start doing this, take a look at all of it, please.
All right. Thank you, Sideways Kid. Mr. Brooks will respond next. One line open, pro-life test, Tea Party Bob, as we defend the dams with the Dam Buster. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Fox News brings you Beacon Plumbing. KIDO Talk Radio. Actually, Beacon Plumbing brings you Fox News. You caught that slip up, didn't you? Thank you, Bo. You didn't have to. Did you catch that, Mr. Brooks?
I did. Wow.
Yes. All right. Mr. Brooks has now become an in-studio monitor. What else is next? Hey, everybody. Dustin's returned from Cleveland. Coming up, we'll hear from Dustin very soon. He's an Idaho native. Mr. Brooks, you've met our political correspondent, Dustin. Mm-hmm. What do you make of him? He loves Cleveland, but he, like you, an Idaho native. Do you love Cleveland, too?
No.
Okay.
I have a strong stance on Cleveland. No, I'm a Packers fan, so, Cleveland's like meh.
Exactly. Now, was there something that you wanted to say before we move on here? Because I cut you off because we, have to pay the bills. You're good? All right.
I forgot, yeah.
Your website again?
www.idahowildlife.org.
All right. Let's go to Tea Party Bob. We're going to get to you next. First, pro-life, who's been very patient. I was worried about your pro-life. I'm glad that you're back on the program. What do you have to say to Mr. Brooks on KIDO Talk Radio?
Well, his organization is denying or just overlooking one of the most serious things happening down the rivers. There's farm chemicals, pharmaceuticals, birth control pills, cleaning chemicals, pesticides, insecticides, industrial chemicals. Our rivers are essentially a sewer, and so if his organization really wants to protect the fish and the wildlife, they will get into trying to teach us and get us off of chemicals. But they will have to fight the pharmaceutical and the chemical companies.
Before Mr. Brooks responds, why don't you give him your credentials, because you have quite amount of years working in the soil, and you currently work in the soil.
Yeah, I'm a certified organic farmer.
Yeah, you grow strawberries and everything else, and you've done that for years.
Right. No, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking off the top of my head. And, so you see people go fish down on the rivers in their boats, but where do they get their water? They don't drink out of the river. They bring water with them. And so everybody's trying to go to the store and get clean water. Now, that's ridiculous. But, anyway, unless this organization who's paying his salary gets serious about stopping the chemical pollution of the rivers, then I don't care about what they say. He's wrong. If they're not going to go there, then I don't respect him. So anyway, he can comment. I'm done commenting. He can answer the question or whatever.
Okie dokie.
Oh, we appreciate you allowing him to answer the question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are more issues under the sun environmentally than my organization can take on. We have 5 staff in Idaho, and we're growing, but there's only so much we can take on. Number 2, I think it's really important to highlight that there are many tributaries that have salmon and steelhead returning to them along the Columbia River. We have the Willamette, the John Day, the Yakima, the Grand Ron. And when you go below the 4 dams on the Snake River, all of those, so all of those rivers have returns that are above a threshold that we can have what we call healthy and harvestable return numbers. It's called the smolt to adult return ratio. To remember, smolt are baby fish. They're about the size of your pinky. Adults are obviously adults coming back. You need above a 2% to have a flatlined population. That's 2 adults replacing themselves. When you get to 4%, and these are millions and millions of fish, we released 21 million fish from Idaho alone. When you get to 4% of 21 million, you have, and you sustain that, you have what's called healthy and harvestable numbers. Idaho has never had above a 2% for wild fish since the dams were built. However, since the dams have been built, every single river tributary below the 4 dams has had above a 2 and sometimes even above 5%. There are wild populations still that you can harvest, you can actually kill on the Yakima River, that because they're coming back so well, even in depressed years. Now, populations ebb and flow. They have good years, they have bad years, but it's a proportion. As long as you're getting to that 4%, you have healthy and harvestable numbers, even with all of the pollution you're talking about and the other gauntlet of issues. Seals and sea lions, bad ocean conditions, pollution, birth control in the water. All of those fish go through that same gauntlet, and yet only Idaho's fish are on an extinction trajectory. So while they do impact all fish, we have to look at what are the variables only impacting Idaho's fish. The ocean is not selectively killing Idaho's fish. Seals and sea lions are not selectively choosing Idaho fish over Willamette River fish. We have one variable that's different than all the others, and that is that our fish have to go through 4 more dams than all the other ones on the way out and 4 more dams on the way back up.
You don't know where they've been. Thank you, Pro-Life, for the call. It's always good to get them through the dams, a little like TSA. All right, Tea Party Bob, publisher of the Gem State Patriot, welcome back. You've been waiting for the dam buster yourself.
Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You know, I appreciate this gentleman's passion, and I love salmon fishing, but I'm a numbers guy, and I have to look at the economic cost of dismantling these dams. In 2020, the most recent estimate for the Army Corps of Engineers to replace the power of those dams on the lower Snake River would be $860 million. Today's cost, it's now over $1 billion. This is not something that we can just pull out of the air and say, okay, here's $1 billion. Go do this. Somebody has to pay for it. We can't even build a reliable electric grid yet. The second thing is, you say transportation by truck is only 140 miles. You need to do some homework because you can carry
river
more
miles.
on a
I didn't
barge.
say it was truck. I said it was the river is 140 miles.
Fine. River miles, fine. I'm going to tell you, an average semi will carry about 60,000 pounds or 1,000 bushels of wheat. A barge, by the same token, a 4-tow barge, will carry 530 times, okay, what you can get in those semi-trucks. Barging is the safest method of moving cargo with a lower number of injuries and fatalities. It's fast. It's better and faster than rail or trucks. And the cost is very low compared to both of those. And there are no emissions, by the way. So if you can fix those problems for me, I'd be all happy. You can take the dams out. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you like being corrected, Mr. Green?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes, exactly. I'm
love
writing an
being
article
corrected.
on Tail and Green, so yes, Mr.
I love
Brooks.
being corrected, and the Gem State Patriot, I've been a target of some of their articles as well.
This is the publisher of the Gem State Patriot.
Exactly. I really appreciated that article specifically. So let me answer some of those comments or questions. We do have rail, but I really challenge the idea that barging is somehow cost effective. The taxpayers are on the hook for paying for the maintenance and operation of those dams, and because shipping is down 80%. This is just the market speaking here, so no assertions here. Since 2000, the peak of barging on the Snake River, there is no more containerized shipping through the lower 4 Snake River dams. Think about the big rail cars you see on big barges. That's not happening anymore. There used to be 17,000 containerized units that went through the lower 4. 0. It's not coming back. Shipping for all other commodities has dropped to 20%. It has fallen 80% since the year 2000 because there are so few barges going through the dams. It is now no longer paying for the receipts to manage them. So the taxpayers have to step in. So someone who calls themselves Tea Party Bob, I am also someone who really enjoys economic fairness.
I call him Tea Party Bob. So
I love that name because
you seem very defensive with Tea Party. Tea Party Bob, did you go after Mr. Brooks?
Not me, but I can tell you the semi-trucks take 3%, the trains take 37%, and the river barges are doing 60%. So tell me how those numbers have changed so dramatically in the last year and a half.
Yeah, so the data I'm quoting comes from the Port of Lewiston Data Query website. You can actually find all this information on your own. The number of ships that go through the Snake River locks, the locks on the dams, has declined 80% since the year 2000. So that data is freely available. The free market is speaking, and it is abandoning the river, which is why I bring up the Tea Party aspect, because I, too, am a fan of fiscal conservatism. Without the help of the government, people are finding other ways to get their products to market. It's not because people are producing 80% less goods and services. It is because they are finding other ways to do it that are more economically viable and less reliant on government subsidy. So anybody who really sees themselves as a fiscal conservative, I think this is the most intriguing aspect of this entire conversation. It is the amount of money we are pouring into BPA, that they force people to use 30% of their power bill to go to failed fish recovery efforts. The federal government here, through the BPA, has unequivocally failed on their fish recovery program. We've spent, and then the cost is something you've mentioned. It costs $1 billion to replace the services of the dams. Tea Party Bob, we're spending about $1 billion a year on failed fish recovery efforts. We're spending that money already. So I say let's take that money and spend it on something that's at least worthwhile.
If that's the cost, would you say $1.7 billion?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You said $1.7 billion.
Why not get the government out of the business of taking care of fish? Use that money to actually do something.
That'd be fine. Then we need to also get, but the argument then becomes, what should we get the government out of? And actually, I would love for BPA to not be managing fish recovery, because they've obviously failed.
You and the Wilkes brothers would be running wild.
That's right.
And you're just kidding. Tea Party Bob, anything else?
No, thank you very much for having this gentleman on. I appreciate it.
Can I say that if you ever want to speak to me, you can go to our website. My email is on there, and I might just be getting tens of thousands of people to send me hate mail. But please email me. I'm happy to meet up over coffee or beer or whatever food. We can talk about this.
What's your website again?
Listen, I happen to be very close. I happen to be very close friends of the guy who used to be the past president of this Salmon River Club that was protecting the salmon for 10 years. So believe me, I'm pretty well up on what you guys are doing.
We believe you.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Tea Party Bob. Your website again, Mr. Brooks?
www.idahowildlife.org.
All right, Mr. Brooks joining us once again. Let's go to, and Lee Joe, hang on, we're going to get to you, but Kurt in Boise, it's got to be quick for Mr. Brooks. He's got to go hug trees or shoot ducks, but please go ahead.
All right, real quick, man. I think the guy sold me on the idea. I know I'm probably going to get slammed, but with 80-year-old technology and the fish, and he's leaving all the concrete into place, and all the money that's going to the federal government, I'm for it, man. You got my vote.
One mind changed, Kevin. I bet there's more of them out there. Thank you, Kurt.
Kurt's become a dam buster. Thank you, Kurt. Lee Joe, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Boy, have you joined the dam busting club?
Well, not really. I know that the dams can't exist with the fish. It's just nobody's looked at the proper technology, a simple technology to have an increased water flow in the channel alongside or as part of the existing reservoir. I've pitched this idea several times to several people, and it will work, but there's no political will for it to happen. So it is possible to get fish from point A to point B in a high-flowing section of water, and nobody will look at it. Nobody's interested. They all want to spend billions and billions on this and that and the other thing. And then by doing this system, we can upgrade those existing dams, get them, get the new technology and the bigger, better, badder generators put in them. It's possible to have this without all the extra side consequences. And I'd be more than happy to talk to Mr. Brooks if you want to give him my phone number or whatever, and we'll discuss how to get a fish from point A to point B without putting it through a generator and keeping it in a high flow stream and keeping it.
Mr. Brooks?
It so it knows how to come back. All these things.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat. My only comment on that is, we have looked at like the salmon cannon, building another river adjacent to the river, and this sounds like a slightly different idea that puts the fish on a different elevated path. But my only comment is, we still will have to take out the dams in 20 years because they have an 80-year lifespan, and this project will spend money. It sounds like to convey fish to the ocean even if it's in a better manner. But it's going to cost money, and then at the same point, it may be obsolete here. So my I guess when it comes down to it, it's like what are the nexuses, and I don't know what plural nexus is, that are coming here, and it's fish are going extinct. The economic reliability of these dams are also declining. We can do something that replaces their services, and we can get our fish back in one blow. Let's do it. Let's think big. We're a country that was built on big ideas, and I think we can do this here.
All right, Lee Joe, thank you for the call. We go to Tess. A couple lines open at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Go ahead, Tess.
Yeah, so, boy, there are a lot of different things involved in this, eh?
Mm-hmm.
But, you have, I don't think people realize the fisheries they really are quite the economic deal. A lot of the communities, even here in Idaho, depend on fisheries for salvation. When you have forest fires, floods, or landslides, and communities don't have access, they lose a phenomenal amount of money because people can't use those fisheries. But my thought is, when you don't think about or you want to move out the fact that you have Japanese and Chinese trawlers out there intercepting these fisheries out in Alaska, you have a lot of fights over who owns what, in the rivers. And my thought would be, because there are some dams that can be breached. They can, even though you're still going to have some problems with other things. But you have a lot of arguments that go on between the Forest Service, who work within the river systems. And I say that because the devastation that was allowed to occur upon the Crooked River here in Idaho by a tribal group was just unbelievable. You have the American River here in Idaho. It is the only and the last wild salmon river in the state, and it's too bad what you see going on with that. You see them tracking fish off Crooked River, off of that fish weir, and they truck it to different places. They separate them out. So how are you affected? How is this affected when you have so many other entities, especially Forest Service and Fish and Game, who are working in those rivers? What do they think about all this? Because I can tell you Fish and Game had an oops here on the reservation at Duck Valley, where they did a ceremonial release for a fishery there to release grown salmon. And they had a catch barrier there, and oops, a bunch of them got loose. So now they have a great salmon return. So how does that play in with all this?
Well, I can't speak for the agencies, but Fish and Game, the commission that oversees Fish and Game, does have a resolution standing from 1998 that supports breaching the dams, and coordinating between state and federal agencies is always a pain in the butt, but that is something that needs to be done here. We do have plenty of data funded by ratepayer dollars and taxpayer dollars that we know where the salmon habitat is being degraded, how many reds. It funds kids going out and counting reds, salmon nests in the summer and stuff like that. So we have a lot of data. But if this ever came to fruition, there's a whole lot of stuff that would need to be coordinated from the headwaters all the way down to the mouth of the Columbia, which, in my opinion, can only be solved by federal legislation. But to get to your really quick, Kevin, the comment about all of the impacts of trawlers, again, I go back to this, the smolt to adult return ratio. All of the tributaries on the Columbia River, Willamette, John Day, Yakima, Grand Ronde, they all go through the same gauntlet of trawlers, of bad ocean conditions, seals, sea lions, terns, birds, all predation, all manner of trawling nets in the river, and fishermen. And yet only Idaho's fish are going extinct. So if we have successes lower in the river when they don't have to go through the dams, that's how we know that these dams will actually have a major impact. But that shouldn't suggest that we cannot also work on international negotiations about fish harvest, that we get a more equitable share, negotiations with downstream states, Oregon and Washington. In my opinion, we should get more Idaho fish coming upstream. We should delay maybe the Washington, Oregon fishing season so we get more hatchery fish coming upstream to Idaho. So there's a lot to work on, but we also, it's very clear, the science is clear, all of those things do not matter if we do not also take out the number one human cause mortality of our fish, and that is the lower four Snake River dams. So let's replace their services and get it done with.
That's a lot of money, Tess. Thank you for the call. Peter in Nampa, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you for listening with Mr. Brooks.
Good morning. Hey, I wanted to, I missed some of the conversation, but I wanted to ask what's the impact on power generation? Mm-hmm. And that impact, is it worth it for saving salmon?
That is an excellent question, because that is the primary, I think, concern of anybody. And we should not be touching any dams until the services they provide are replaced. And the main services the lower four Snake River dams provide are power generation and transport. So there are, in many plans, there are many different options to replace the power. We can do other hydro projects. There's in-river, there's out-of-river hydro projects. We can do modular nuclear reactors. There's natural gas. Sounds all
expensive.
It is all expensive. But I'll tell you this, Kevin, the forecast for how much it would cost is less than what we are spending now on failed fish recovery efforts. We have spent $24 billion, adjusted for inflation. It is the most expensive species recovery effort in world history, and we do not have any fish in Idaho to show for it. If we wait another 20 years, we will have spent $48 billion with a B dollars on, if we just keep to the same track. Or we have measured it out. It costs about $30 billion if you want to replace all the stuff that Simpson wants to replace in southern Idaho. But just to replace the services of the dams, it'll cost, even people who oppose it, it'll cost about $15 billion max. That's still far less than what we've already spent, and a third of what we will spend if we do nothing. So it's cheaper to actually do this. I want people to understand the money we're spending now. This is large amounts of money, $800 to $1 billion a year, BPA's Fish and Wildlife money that is taken as a third of people's power bill and being put into things that are not showing results. What if we had the same amount of money or a third of it, and we got new infrastructure out of it? It's fiscally responsible. We can get new stuff, and we can reinvest in the community of Lewiston and surrounding communities. One last point.
What about this area? Who cares about them?
What?
I don't care about them. I don't live in Lewiston.
Well, a lot of people around this area do have some of their power bills augmented by BPA flow of power traded, bought and sold with other utilities.
All right. Now, Jefferson, are you going to cuss me out? Because if you are, I'm going to hang up on you.
No, I've never done that, Kevin. So
I thought. Wait, it must be a new Jefferson. Then I apologize, Jefferson. You're on the air on KIDO Talk Radio. My bad. Go ahead, please.
So my question is: it seems like you're investing in these fish, but the fish are leaving the state, and you're expecting them to return, which is an expectation that can't be expected, because, like, what if there's like a nuclear leak in the ocean, totally takes it out? What if there's like acidity in the ocean that increases and the fish die? And then there's also the issue of GMO salmon, which is not a question of if, but when they escape into the natural environment and start breeding with normal salmon, you're going to get frankenfish. So if you invest in these fish, but then they never return to Idaho.
Okay, 20 seconds. Frankenfish.
Well, the fish are returning. We have genetic diversity all around the globe of different salmon and steelhead. They were in each of these segments of streams that they return to. That actually is in their genetic code.